you put in place some really healthy support systems and structures.
Right.
Some are just routines that you do.
Yep.
Some are, other people that you plug into, communities that can also.
Yeah.
give
If you want to
that.
achieve big things, I think you need to surround yourself with great people, right? I mean, Jim Rohn said,
And get up early.
And get up early,
Get up
right?
early.
You don't have to get up early, but Jim Rohn famously said, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Tony Robbins says, you rise to the level of the peers that you surround yourself with. So it's important to look at, who are you surrounding yourself? What kinds of people are you spending time around? If you want to achieve big things, be an entrepreneur, whatever it is, I think it's good to be around those types of people.
Yeah. So our show today is going to be all about this really, really important concept and idea, mindset. And if you're like me, we could all use a refresher in this. We've all had some obstacle, something that didn't go as the way we had planned or expected over the last year. And so we're going to really talk about mindset and how do we adjust when those things don't go the way we want them to. So my guest today is a fantastic person for this topic. His name's Andy Storch. Andy's got a great personal story about some obstacles he's been going through and how mindset has really helped him through that. I'm going to let him share those stories, so stay tuned. But Andy is an author, consultant, coach, speaker, and facilitator. He's the host of 2 podcasts, the Talent Development Hot Seat and the Andy Storch Show. And he's the co-founder and host of the Talent Development Think Tank Conference and Community. He's also the author of the book, Own Your Own Career and Own Your Own Life, which was recently published in 2020. So stay tuned. I know you're going to enjoy the conversation. And at the end, I will share with you all my notes.
The Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. The Leadership Foundry brings a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development. The Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
Hey, Andy, I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me on the show and here in your studio with you. I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think I've had maybe one other guest actually in person this year in the studio.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
I
nice
have
to-
not recorded the podcast in a studio in a long time, if ever. So this is really neat.
I know. So it's kind of nice. I even forgot to put my earbuds in for a minute. I was like, wow, this is a little different.
Right.
So our conversation today, we're going to chat a little bit about mindset. I know that's something that you're really passionate about. And so I would really love to get your perspective around that because I think, at least as I think about mindset, I mean, gosh, we're all rethinking what that means to us and maybe even trying to strengthen that a little bit. I heard someone say recently, they said, the transition into the pandemic was hard for everybody, but the transition out of it is going to be even harder.
Indeed.
So I would love to kind of get your wisdom and guidance around that. But before we jump into that,
Yeah.
for all my folks listening, I would love for them to hear a little bit about you. So to share a little bit about your journey, what kind of got you in the seat that you're in today, and
Sure.
and some of the things that you're thinking about as you're going forward.
Yeah, well, I'll share a little bit of background for context, especially because I know this show is about careers, and everybody has I would say, a winding and different road and unique path through their career, and I have as well. I did my undergrad at the University of Florida, where I met my wife, and we moved out to California. And at the time, I thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I got into entrepreneurship and tried my hand at a couple startups. I joined a couple startups, and all of it failed. Nothing worked out. In fact, along the way, I worked for a couple really terrible bosses in a couple startups.
Did you?
Oh, yes, and learned some lessons on how not to be as a leader.
I bet you've got some
Right.
stories.
Oh, yeah, there are some stories, right? Just some real tyrants, if you will. And I started a couple companies with friends, and nothing that ever worked out. And so then I got into the corporate world. A friend of mine got me a job at an insurance company, and it wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills, and started kind of moving up there. But I wasn't terribly happy with what I was doing. So I decided to go back to school, and I got an MBA. And I went through a part-time MBA program, going to school. And it was at that time that I also got really big into networking. In 2005, when I read a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi.
I know that book.
You know that book. It absolutely changed my outlook and perspective. I went from being this really shy kid growing up, came out of my shell a little bit in college, but when I read that, I thought I really need to get intentional about building my network. This is probably the most important thing for me in my career. And so that's what I did. I went on a mission when I was in business school to go meet as many people as I could. And it resulted in the final year, I was elected president of the school, 700 students. And I say purely, maybe there's some leadership qualities there, but purely because I knew more people than anybody else, right? And it was the truth. I went around getting to know everybody as well as I could and making lots and lots of friends. And it resulted in that. And every opportunity I've gotten in my career before that, and especially after that, has come through my network. So after that, I stayed in insurance for a little while, and then I got very lucky that I reached out to a friend of mine who had been in sales before, and I thought maybe I wanted to get into sales. And I said, hey, Adam, I know you worked in sales for a long time. I'm thinking about getting into sales. Could you give me some advice? And that's when he said, oh, I recently just started this great consulting company. You should come check it out. And so again, connection, making a difference for me. He made an introduction, got me an interview, helped me prepare. And I got was essentially a dream job for me at the time, where I had been very frustrated in my career before because I wasn't really doing anything that was leveraging any of my strengths. I was working as a data analyst, and I was fine, but not excelling. Where I now found this new job where I got to create different solutions for clients, travel all the time, get up in front of a room and facilitate workshops. And I found that was something that I was really good at, that I really enjoyed.
So it's more than just sales. I mean,
Oh yeah, it didn't end up being sales. He had gotten into this consulting role. The sales was part of it, but there were so many other things. And it was something I didn't know existed until he made that introduction and brought me into it.
Because it sounds like it's got lots of components, had lots of hats to it.
Well, interestingly enough, the consulting role in this company, they call it a triple threat. And so one part of it was creating these business simulations, and it was kind of a project management type role, if you will. The second part was facilitating workshops, and the third part was sales. And the idea was you really had to be good at all three of these things to move up. And it was kind of an up or out kind of culture, if you will.
Yeah.
And I ran into a challenge. And this goes into, in my book, and where I speak with a lot of people, I talk about really getting to know your strengths and your weaknesses, because sometimes you can overcome your weaknesses, sometimes you can't, and you want to spend more time trying to double down on your strengths, right? So I found out that I was really good at the facilitation part of the job. I was pretty good at sales too, better than I expected or anybody else expected, but I really struggled with the development side of things, the project management stuff, and it turns out I'm not very detail oriented. And so I ran into challenges there, and there was a kind of a pivotal moment where I'm this ambitious guy in my early 30s, and I really want to move up in this company. I love the company and the job, but I'm not really cutting it. And I had a meeting with my manager and my boss's boss, who's this woman named Jessica, who's the greatest leader I've ever worked for. And they sat me down and basically said, you're not getting a promotion because you're not cutting it. And there were tears shed in that meeting. I was just so disappointed.
Yeah.
But what happened after that was what really changed my career, because she invited me to breakfast and said, I recognize these strengths in you, and I think that we can utilize them in different ways. And I want to create a new position for you in the company that will allow you to do more of the sales stuff and continue to facilitate workshops for clients, and less of the project management part that maybe you're not that good at. And so she did, and that allowed me to learn so much more about sales, about networking again in the corporate space, continue to travel and meet a lot of people. And that led me down the road to doing what I'm doing today. In 2016, I got into the world of personal development, if you will. I never was really doing any type of personal development before that. But when I read a book called The Miracle Morning by a guy named Hal Elrod, I heard him on a podcast and bought his book and read it right away. And that book absolutely changed my life as well, because, and the idea behind it, if you're not familiar, Hal Elrod had kind of his business went bankrupt in 2008 timeframe, like many people, and he was in the depths of despair and went looking for, how do I get out of this? What are the things that the most successful people do to be more successful? And he kind of went out and researched it and found the 6 most common things that successful people do and put them together in one morning routine. So it's meditation, affirmations, visualization, reading, writing in a journal, and exercising. And the idea is you get up an hour earlier than you normally would and do these things every day. And I had never really been doing any of this stuff, other than I had always been a fitness guru and exercising all the time. So I started getting up early. I started meditating for the first time. I started reading a lot more books, using my journal to kind of track progress on goals.
So how early did you get up?
Well, I'm already kind of a morning person. So let's say I was getting up at 7 or something before. I started getting up at 5:30 and then 5 a.m. And then I changed it to 4:30 because I was so in love with it, having that time.
4:30?
Yeah, having that time.
See, Andy,
morning.
every single person I talk to,
Yeah.
successful people always say you got to get up early. And I really want to do it. I'm just not a morning guy.
Right. Well, I think that's okay.
I've got to figure out a way
Yeah.
to do this better.
Well, I think that everybody needs to do what fits them best. Like, I'm a big fan of the morning routine, but if you don't like getting up in the morning and you can make time in the afternoon or the evening to do some of these things, then,
I don't really do that either.
Right. You got to do whatever works for you. But what I love about those early mornings is, I've got 2 kids and it's quiet time before the kids get up, right? And I can spend time reading.
And what are their ages?
My kids are 7 and 5 now.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, at the time when I started doing this, I had a 1-year-old or 2-year-old and one more on the way. So it was a different situation. But, an example of what I found with that, and I know you love books, and I've always loved books. But at that time, I would do most of my reading at night when I went to bed. So I would get in bed, and tell me if this is familiar. I would open a business book, especially. I would read 1 or 2 pages, and then I'd fall asleep, right? Mm-hmm. And so on average, I would read about 2 books a year. When I started this morning routine, I started dedicating time, usually 15 to 20 minutes every morning, to reading a business book. Since I started doing that, I've averaged reading 25 to 30 books a year. It's a big, big difference, between reading at night and reading in the morning. I also have been meditating every single day since then, and using journals to track a lot of progress on these things, and using affirmations to kind of remind myself of the goals. And this is what allowed me to get a lot more done. And I also started listening to a lot more podcasts. I know you're a big fan of podcasts as well, and our listeners here are as well. And rediscovered the area of entrepreneurship that I had been so interested in early in my career, and realized, in doing a lot more self-assessment, because you have this quiet time, you're reading, writing things in the journal, listening to a podcast. I'm doing a lot more self-reflection and assessment and thinking about my strengths and weaknesses and what I really love to do, and realizing that I am really drawn towards this idea of entrepreneurship. I want to be my own boss. I want to, have that potential to grow a business and a brand. And so eventually I found an opportunity, again, through a relationship, to leave the job I was in, to become an independent consultant. I started my first podcast. A year later, I started a second podcast. And that podcast, as I was telling you earlier, about talent development grew so much. I hosted a conference back in January 2020 called the Talent Development Think Tank, which eventually morphed into a membership community that I run. I published my first book last year, and I'm building a business around that. So just continue to grow the business and the brand and everything around what I've been learning and what I've been doing. And there have been a few challenges along the way, which we can get into, especially when we talk about mindset, but that's kind of the career I've been on.
That is so exciting. So exciting. So this may be a tough question to answer. There may not even be an answer to this question, but was there a particular pivot point, like one activity that you did that really turned it for you, or a moment in time that just was a snap?
Well, definitely when I started practicing that Miracle Morning, I heard Hal Elrod on the podcast and got his book and started practicing that and started doing all those things that I mentioned. I'd say that was probably the biggest pivotal point in my career. And then after that, there are several other pivotal things that happened. One of them was starting to seek out help and surround myself with great people who are doing similar things, right? So I know you're big on coaching. You do coaching as well. Yeah. So hiring coaches, joining mastermind groups. The first kind of paid mastermind group I joined was a group for dads. And I started making a lot of friends through that group and connecting with a lot of people who were also ambitious, doing interesting things. And then I joined a group for entrepreneurs and hired a coach to help me kind of transition out of my job into running a business. And I continue to do that today, right? I'm a member of a lot of communities. I hire coaches and join mastermind groups. And that has been, in addition to just doing my own work on myself, that's probably been, one of the biggest things that's helped me become so successful.
So I think the storyline I'm hearing in this is you put in place some really healthy support systems and structures.
Right.
So some are just routines that you do.
Yep.
Some are, other people that you plug into, communities that can also.
Yeah. Because if you want to achieve big things, I think you need to surround yourself with great people, right? I mean, Jim Rohn said.
And get up early.
And get up early, right? You don't have to get up early. But Jim Rohn famously said, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Tony Robbins says, you rise to the level of the peers that you surround yourself with. So it's important to look at, who are you surrounding yourself? What kinds of people are you spending time around? If you want to achieve big things, be an entrepreneur, whatever it is, I think it's good to be around those types of people.
Yeah. Love that setup. So thank you. So let's talk about mindset. So when you think about mindset, maybe a good starting place for us is how do you define that? What does mindset mean to you?
Well, for me, when I think about mindset, it's all about perception. It's how do you perceive the world? How do you experience the world? How do you react to things? Because when not to get too deep and philosophical, right? But when you look around and things are happening, right? There are actions, there are experiences. There's really no such thing as a good or bad thing, right? It's all our interpretation. It's all our perception on things, right? So, a classic example is like you go into work one day and your boss says, hey, we're doing layoffs, and you lose your job. Is that good or bad, right? Most people would probably say, well, that's bad, right? I don't want to lose my job, right? But what if losing that job allows you to then go find an even better job a week later and your dream job comes along? Well, then it was pretty good that you got laid off so that you could go find this other job, right? You really never know, but it comes down to your perception, to your outlook. And I'm a big fan of taking an ownership mindset, if you will, and really taking responsibility for everything that's going on in your career and your life, and realizing that there are a lot of things in the world that are outside of our control, right? Politics, the global economy, pandemics, what your boss does, what your company does, even what your spouse or your kids do, you can't necessarily control. But there are a lot of things we can control, how we show up at work, how we show up for our family, what we do in relationships, taking care of our body, whether we get up early or not, getting enough sleep, how we interact with people, how we treat other people. That was just a little, it was a callback. It was a callback, not a dig.
It was a callback.
But there are things that we do have control over, and I find that there's a lot more fulfillment in focusing on things that you can control, and that how we show up and how we perceive the world and our happiness a lot of times comes down to our mindset, and our mindset comes down to like, how do we think about things? How do we interpret things? If you do get laid off, is that good or bad? If someone cuts you off in traffic, do you care about that or not? Some people get really worked up and angry. I personally am like, I don't care.
So I love this. So I want to ask a question about this.
Yeah.
So I wrote down a word that is one of my favorite words for 2021. And when I think about ownership mindset, the way you said it, I wrote down the word agency.
Interesting.
I love this idea of like agency, like a personal sense of agency. Like I have a sense of ability to impact my life around me. Like I have agency around that. Like I can choose to exercise. I can choose to get up early.
That's right.
I could choose to.
It might be harder for you than others, but you could choose. You could try, right?
That's right. I could try. Yeah. I could try.
Yeah.
But agency, because I think agency is like that sense that things don't happen to me. I can have an impact on the things that happen around me or how I interpret those things.
Yeah.
So whether we use the word ownership mindset or agency, I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you see this idea of ownership mindset play out over the last 12 months.
Well, yeah, this is big. And I'm glad you said something about things happening to you. So I'm also a big fan of shifting your mindset and your outlook from the philosophy that things happen to me to instead things happen for me. Everything in life happens for me. And when you truly believe that, and it's hard, especially when tough things are happening, it opens up a whole world of opportunities. So let's go back to this past year. 2020 was hard on a lot of people, right? You and I were talking right before we started recording. My whole business before COVID hit was selling and running in-person training. I was on planes all the time, flying around the country and the world. When COVID hit, I had flights booked. I had client workshops booked for different cities and different countries. And all of that went away. My entire business went away. Clients said, hey, we're canceling all of this. Even when I said, hey, do you want to do it virtually? Like, we don't really want to do this for a while. We're still trying to figure things out, right? So that was a big, big challenge for me. And I took a day or two to kind of cry about it and like, okay, what are we going to do? But then the ownership mindset or having the agency is kind of stepping up and saying, I'm going to take responsibility for this. I can't control the pandemic, right? But I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to turn this into an opportunity somehow. How can I do that? And so I look for ways to find opportunities. I had more conversations with clients, find out what people are working on, made some shifts in my business. I ended up pivoting and I launched the membership community I mentioned. I hosted a virtual summit last year that had nearly 2,000 people attend because we didn't have conferences anymore. Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
It was a lot of people. It was a free summit.
But still,
you
got people to come.
It was really cool. We had 32 speakers, and what I learned from that time. And so when big challenges come up, by the way, I have 3 questions that I love to ask, and they're in my book, and I can share a resource so people can grab these if they're not taking notes. Number 1 is what's great about this. Number 2 is what can I learn from this? And number 3 is, what does this make possible?
Hold on, I'm trying to catch up.
Okay, so what's great about this? What can I learn from this?
Yeah.
And what does this make possible? So
Ooh,
you think
what
about
does this
COVID
make
hitting,
possible?
what was great about it, it shut down my whole business. But at the time, I was traveling a lot, and I had 2 young kids, as we talked about before.
Yeah.
So what was great about this, we can find silver linings in almost everything that happens, almost every challenge in life. There are some that are devastating, right? But we can find silver linings off it. So for me, the silver lining was I was not traveling anymore, and I was home with my kids, my wife and my kids, every night. Pretty much since then, for the last 15 months, we've been home together, and I've spent so much more quality time with them that I don't really want to do much of that traveling as much anymore as I used to, right? So that's
Yeah.
a huge silver lining. So that's what's great about it. What can I learn from this? Well, a big lesson is anything can happen. We need to do more to prepare ourselves for the future, because you can't rely on that job or business that you have that's going so well right now, lasting forever, right? And I have, there's 3 sections in my book. The whole middle section is about preparing for the future. What can you do to prepare yourself for future opportunities, challenges, whatever they may do, so that you're in good shape when they do come up? And then the third lesson is, what does this make possible? Well, it actually allowed me to spend more time working on my book. It allowed me to launch this membership community that I had been putting off doing for a long time, hosting the virtual summit, which helped me build a bigger email list and a brand in the talent development space. It created a lot of opportunities that would not have existed before. Another example I give on that is, I mentioned I hosted a conference. So in 2019, I spent most of the year with a friend of mine. We were hosting this conference, most of the year marketing and trying to bring people in to this conference. And if you've ever hosted a conference, it's a lot of work. It's about 150 people. We ended up selling it out, but for a long time, we weren't sure if anybody was going to come.
I want to pause for a minute on
Yeah.
this. So the hosting of a conference.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something earlier you mentioned.
Yeah.
There's a lot of project management skills in that.
Well,
So you took on something that
Yes.
that you knew wasn't necessarily a strength of yours.
Yes.
How did you kind of figure out a way to make that happen?
Well, I'll tell you how. That's a very astute observation, right? So I think it's really important that you get to know your strengths and weaknesses, understand, what you bring to the table. And then when you think about your weaknesses, are they things that you want to work on and try to improve? Or is it something you want to delegate, outsource to other people? And maybe that's someone you hire. Like I have an assistant, right, who helps me with a lot of detail-oriented stuff. Thank goodness, or I wouldn't be able to keep up, right? Or maybe it's collaboration or partnership, right? So I mentioned I partnered with my friend on this conference, and our partnership was really perfect because our skills complement each other. He's much more detail-oriented, much better at the project management stuff, and has no interest in being on stage, right, in front of all the people. Whereas I love all the marketing stuff. I love being on stage. So he set up the whole agenda, right? We worked together on who do we want to speak there, but he managed the whole agenda. He managed the person, all the food and everything that was going on behind the scenes, and making sure everything was set up perfectly. And I was doing like nonstop marketing, posting on LinkedIn every day, talking about my podcast, and then I was the guy on stage introducing all the speakers. So I found someone whose strengths complemented mine,
Nice.
and I didn't have to get as much into the details. I mean, I help with some of the things, but if it was up to me to like set up that agenda and keep things running, we might have had some problems, right? There might have been some things that fell through the cracks. But I've recognized that now, so I don't try to take those things on without help. I am actually organizing an in-person retreat for my community coming up in September, and it's much smaller. It's only going to be 25 people, and I am creating the agenda. But again, I have an assistant now who helps me with the project management stuff, and I'm going to rely on her to make sure that all the details are taken care of along the way. So it's a good question. And going back to that, organizing that conference, it was planned for November 2020. And I don't know if you remember this, but it's November 2019.
Okay.
In Sonoma, California, Santa Rosa,
Oh,
California.
yeah. That
At the
was
time,
not a
there
good
were some big
location.
wildfires
Yeah.
going on. The Kincaid wildfire in Sonoma, California was growing. And I remember a month before, someone was like, should we worry about these wildfires? I was like, nah, they never come in the city. Well, a week before the conference, I got a call that the hotel had been evacuated and they were not going to be hosting any more conferences there. So we had the opportunity, the pleasure of emailing 150 people who were coming in, by the way, from all over North America, the Caribbean islands, even the UK. But this conference to say, this conference is not happening, we're postponing. Now, luckily, we were able to find a new date in January that worked for the venue, and all 4 of our amazing speakers who were big-time speakers flying all over the place. It was a miracle that we were able to get them all booked. Some people were not able to attend the new dates, but a lot of people were. Now, I'm bringing this back to the 3 questions I asked, and what was great about it is we definitely learned a lot from the process. But getting to the third question, which is what does this make possible? Because challenges, I believe, always do create new opportunities, was that there were people who couldn't attend the November date who then said, oh, I could come in January, and bought a ticket. And some of those people have become clients, members of my community, and have become good friends. And I never would have met them if the fire didn't happen.
Oh, wow.
And the conference didn't change dates, right? And I think we can all think of those things in our lives, right? Where something happened, we're like, I didn't plan on this happening. I wouldn't have wished it happened, but once it did, it created whole new opportunities in our life. And I'm a big fan of seeing those silver linings, turning challenges into opportunities, and really operating with this ownership mindset and this belief that everything in life happens for us, not to us. And even if it's something we don't necessarily want, it could be an opportunity for us. We just have to start to think about it that way and look for the opportunities.
And I love those questions. And what's beautiful about the time that we're in right now, as much as it's been challenging, everyone has experienced it.
Yes, absolutely.
Everyone has experienced going through a pandemic and having their world flipped upside down.
Yeah.
So they can all of us can think about those questions. What was great about this? What can I learn? And what does this make possible?
And for a lot of people, you and I both do work in the corporate space, right? There are a lot of people around the world now who didn't have the opportunity to work from home before. They were told they had to come into the office, and now they've loved working from home. And what's great about this is I've been home with my kids. I've been walking my dog during the day. I don't have this commute anymore. And a lot of people are saying, I don't want to go back, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of opportunities have come out of this, and it'll be interesting to see where it all goes.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of a funny personal example. So I was battling back problems for a long time, and I found this great posture therapist, and she helped fix that. And so I'm like, finally, I can get myself in good physical shape.
I noticed your posture is really nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My wife would be glad you say that.
Okay.
She says I slouch all the time.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm sitting up a little straighter. So then I got plantar fasciitis. If you've ever had plantar fasciitis, it is not fun. So it's basically, it really is about pulling from your calf, but you feel it in your heel.
Okay.
And it's just a nagging pain. So you can't run.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can't do. And I couldn't get it to go away. I had it for like a year. Well, turns out plantar fasciitis is on my gas pedal foot. So when I stopped commuting and driving around, all of a sudden, it went away.
Pain went away. Wow.
Went away. And then my wife convinced me to join, I've talked about this before on the show, she convinced me to join Orange Theory Fitness.
Okay.
And it's high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
I always tell people I died the first 8 classes. Apparently I'm like a cat. I've got one life left. I'm living it right now.
Oh, wow.
But the beautiful thing about that is I've gotten myself in the best physical shape of my life.
That's amazing.
And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I still been driving around.
Yeah.
Or flying all over the place.
Right.
No doubt. There's like a little mini example, but it changed some things. And now, of course, I don't want to lose that. So as I'm thinking about going into post-pandemic, I want to make sure my routine involves less gas pedal stuff and more Orange Theory stuff.
Right. You can learn from these opportunities.
And maybe getting up earlier in the morning.
Maybe.
Stuff. We'll have to see. So I want to go back to something else around mindset for you.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit before this, before the show. You haven't mentioned it yet, but you had a battle with cancer.
Yes.
So talk a little about, if you're comfortable talking about, a little about that journey and how this mindset approach helped you view that challenge in a different way.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it, and it helped me immensely. So going back to, I hosted that virtual summit I mentioned in September. I took a vacation with my family for a week, and then I came back in October and was planning on, I'd been working on my book, Own Your Career, Own Your Life, all year long. I was like, now it's time to go into
which is right here, by the way.
Which you have holding, that's right.
It became real.
In your hands, that's right. It's a real book. It was time to start working on the final plans to publish it. And I started experiencing these pains in my stomach, my abdomen, pain and discomfort, and eventually saw a doctor and found out that I had a lump on my testicle that was likely testicular cancer. And so I went to the urologist, and he said, "Oh, this is likely testicular cancer. The only thing we can do is remove your testicle. I can get you in for surgery next Wednesday," which is kind of a shock. Where you're like, "Wait a minute, you want to take this out next week?" And meanwhile, I had about 3 weeks left to get my book done. So I published the book, and 2 days later, I went into surgery, had my testicle removed, and was kind of on the couch resting for a few days, and hoping that would kind of be it. So along the way, I had already been, I post and share a lot on social media, and I had shared that I was going through this, and That was great because it allowed me to connect with a couple people who had been through similar experiences, including a college friend who had no idea, had the same thing, had testicular cancer, had his testicle removed. And for most of the people I talked to, they had the surgery and that was it. They caught it early enough. I was still experiencing a lot of pain after that. And unfortunately, I think I waited too long because I got some scans and went to see an oncologist and found out the cancer had spread to my stomach and my neck. And I had these lymph nodes sticking out of my neck that were, you could see them across the room. So it had been growing for quite a while. This is similar to, if you remember Lance Armstrong, the famous cyclist. He had testicular cancer when he was 26, and his had spread all the way to his brain. And he had a tumor in his brain that he had surgically removed. His doctors didn't think he was going to make it at all. But he did, and he went on to win 7 Tour de France's, with an asterisk, I guess. But he did, and he got back in great shape. So I kept that, and that's actually what my urologist said. He said, well, you probably have testicular cancer, but don't worry, Lance Armstrong had it spread all over his brain. They took care of it. He's totally fine. I'm like, okay, thanks. That's great. So
all the way to his brain, but he's fine.
He's fine
now.
He's fine. Exactly. So it was a bit of a shock, but I choose to see these things as challenges. This is just another challenge in my life. It's a roadblock, a speed bump, and we're going to get through it. I was big on the time. I've always been pretty big on, kind of taking a natural approach to things, big on health and fitness. I started doing a lot of research on cancer and nutrition and changed a lot of things with my diet, started juicing, introduced a lot of different supplements, started doing a lot of different things that I thought could possibly beat the cancer naturally. Unfortunately, the pain got so bad in January that I ended up going into the hospital and doing chemotherapy. And that started to take care of the cancer. I was still in a lot of pain after that. It turned out I had pancreatitis as well, which, by the way, I don't recommend to anybody. It's extremely painful. But we took care of that, and I ended up doing 2 cycles of chemo back in January, February, March, April timeframe of this year, 2021. Lost all my hair, had some really, really tough days where, and lots of people know people who go through cancer, go through chemo. It's definitely by far the most awful experience I've ever been through in my life. It's just, it makes you feel terrible, right? And I had some really tough days. But there were a couple of things that I remembered, and going back to our conversation about mindset, I've done a lot of work on my mindset leading up to this, right? So I'm choosing to see this as a challenge. I know I'm going to get through this. I'm going to try to make the most of this. I'm remaining optimistic. I'm planning for the future. I'm never worried that I'm not going to make it or something. It's just, I know it's going to be hard for a little while.
Yeah.
There were a couple things that really got me through the toughest times. And these are things that you can use for any challenge. Number one was, I happened to be having a conversation with my friend Lauren Davis, who told me she had a tattoo that said, "This is how it is right now." And on the hardest days, when I felt absolutely awful, I would remember that phrase. It was almost like my motto, "This is how it is right now," to remind myself of the nature of impermanence, which is something I've studied through mindfulness and meditation that I've done a lot of, which is that this is not going to last forever. I know I'm going to get through this. It is awful today. It'll probably be awful tomorrow. But if I do all the right things, I'm going to get through this, and it's not going to be like this forever. But this is how it is right now, and I'm going to embrace this, experience this, deal with it as best I can. The second thing is gratitude. I've always been a fan of gratitude. I've had a regular gratitude practice, but I really doubled down on that in writing down my gratitude every single day throughout this experience. And some people might, if you're not used to it, think like, well, what are you grateful for? You're going through cancer and you're going through chemotherapy. Well, it doesn't matter. The truth is, no matter what we're going through in life, we always have things to be grateful for, right? Whether it's family, friends, a roof over our head, a meal that we can eat, just being alive that day, a good cup of coffee, good weather, whatever. You can be grateful for anything. And just the practice of noting your gratitude and feeling grateful can really change your outlook and mindset, I think, on anything in life. And I got to the point where I would actually write down every day that I was grateful for this cancer and for this experience.
Wow.
And I started doing that regularly and started really shifting my own mindset on it to one of gratitude that I get to go through this experience for whatever reason. I didn't know why yet. Why do I get to go through this? Why did this happen for me? Especially surprising because, as I mentioned, I've always been pretty healthy. But you never know where this stuff is going to come from. So 2 things I did every single day. One was meditate for at least 10 minutes, and one was practice my gratitude. And that helped me a lot to get through this. And as I've gotten through it, and by the way, I did 2 cycles of chemo. The doctor recommended a 3rd cycle. I decided to decline it because I wanted to take more of a natural route. And I've been totally fine since then. I'm feeling great. I'm back to probably 90%. And it's all worked out, and I'm grateful for it. And one of the things I've come back to is that third question, what does this make possible, right? There's a lot of things I learned from this. What is this great about this? What does this make possible? And a friend of mine reached out to me after he read my book and said, you write a lot about believing that everything in life happens for you, not to you. Do you really believe that about cancer? And I had to think about it for a minute, but I said, yes, I absolutely do. I do believe this happened for me. And what this makes possible is that I now have more empathy for people who are going through serious health issues. And number two, I get to talk about it and I get to help more people who are going through a similar experience, right? Because a lot of people are either going to go through cancer or going to know somebody, have a loved one who go through it. And by sharing a lot of what I've gone through, people have reached out to me for help. I've been able to make recommendations on all the things that I did. And I truly believe, I hope, that I'm going to be able to help more people as a result. And I think that's true for any major life type of challenge that we go through, whether it's cancer, a divorce, a death in the family, health issues, losing a job, that when you go through something like that and you get through it and you come out on the other side, then you are now qualified to help somebody else, right? If you're willing. Whereas those of us who haven't gone through that experience maybe can't help them as easily, right? So for me, it gives me the power and the ability to go out and help more people. And that kind of makes me happier about the fact that I got a chance to go through that experience.
Yeah, wow, that's super powerful. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's such an interesting way to look at challenges in life, is to really have that sense of gratitude for that and how it can change you and shaped you. And then I love that idea that now you're qualified.
That's right. Right?
Qualified, yeah.
Like I haven't been through a divorce, right? Luckily, I've been married for 17 years, but I know friends who have, right? And if I have a friend who goes through divorce, I can console them, or a death and, lose a spouse, which I haven't done, right? I can console them, but I can't tell them from personal experience like someone else could if they've been through that, right?
Yeah.
Or losing a job. I have a friend right now who's been laid off a couple times, and she's gone through this experience. She's writing a book about it to help other people who have also been laid off, because it's a different experience from just like, oh, I quit, I decided to go do something else, right?
Yeah.
And some people really struggle to go through that, and hearing from others who have been through a similar experience can really be helpful. And so maybe I'll just use that as an excuse opportunity to mention one other thing that I talk about in my book that I think is really important when you have big career goals or you're facing challenges, you're just trying to accomplish anything, which is asking for help, right?
Yeah.
Talking to other people. I know you're big on this, having experience as a therapist and a coach, that you can accomplish so much more and you feel so much better when you have people to talk to about it. And I'm so lucky that throughout my cancer experience, I had close family and friends around me. My wife there to help take care of me. My mom lives nearby and was able to help take care of me. My kids were in the house. I get to see them every day. And I have a big network and lots of friends who are checking on me all the time. But I see people sometimes who they really try to keep things inside and don't tell anybody about it because maybe they're afraid it's going to make them look bad or something like that. And I feel like a lot of times it just makes it worse, right? You need a chance to open up and be able to talk to somebody and ask somebody for help and say, hey, I'm going through this challenging time. I'm struggling. Can I just talk to you about it? Can I get some help from you? And people love to help others, right? And if you don't ask them, you're almost robbing them of that opportunity.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, Andy, this is great. This time has really flown. So I ask all my guests this question. So is there one life hack you have for us on how we can either have better conversations or healthier relationships, either at work or at home?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and there are a couple things. Number one is curiosity. I think curiosity is one of the most important traits of a great leader, or anybody if you want to be successful in your career and your life. And having curiosity and focusing on curiosity can help you avoid making assumptions, right? Which is where we get into a lot of trouble in relationships, right? Because we assume that people have the same worldview or perspective on things than we do when they don't, or we assume that they're doing something for a reason that maybe we don't understand until we start asking questions and we get really curious. And the second thing is to remember, kind of related to that one important lesson I've learned that has helped me so much with relationships throughout the last, let's say, 5 years that I've gotten through this, is the root of all disappointment and most frustration is missed expectations. And most missed expectations are because they were not communicated, right? So think about the expectations that you have of others, and were those ever actually communicated? Or did you just expect somebody to do something and then they didn't do it? And I mean, once I learned that lesson, I reflected back on like almost every argument I've had with my wife over the last 20 years has become because one of us expected the other person to do something and didn't actually communicate it.
Yeah,
right? And this happens with colleagues, coworkers, all the time,
Yeah.
right? So curiosity and remembering that expectations without proper communication really sets you up for
I love both
disaster.
of those. You and I
Yeah.
could have a whole show on both of those.
I know,
actually.
right?
I will say, I often tell people, since I'm all about curing workplace dysfunction,
Yeah.
I tell folks you can eliminate 50% of all people-related dysfunction at work and at home
Yeah.
by clarifying your expectations and theirs.
Yes.
50%. 50% of all the people
Oh.
throwing elbows, stepping on toes, is just
Easy.
because they're guessing wrong,
Right.
or you left them some gray area and they just kind of did whatever they wanted to do.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, this
And
is
you,
awesome.
you hope and assume, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
get us anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so this has been great. If people want to learn more about you, buy a copy of your awesome book, Own Your Career, Own Your Life. Where can they go?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Brandon. This has been fun. I know we could do more of these. So the book, Own Your Career, Own Your Life, it's available on Amazon. If you want to get the 3 questions that I mentioned, plus some other bonus resources I have, including the 5 steps to owning your career, you can go to ownyourcareerownyourlife.com/bonus. ownyourcareerownyourlife.com/bonus. All the bonus resources are there for free. You just put in your email address. And then I've got 2 podcasts, the Talent Development Hot Seat and the Own Your Career Show. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram if anybody wants to reach out and tell me you heard me on the Workplace Therapist Show.
What an ending. Nice. Andy, this was great. Thanks again for coming on. And I look forward to kind of following you on your journey.
Absolutely. I'm just starting out a long road trip with my family, truly owning my life. And this is one of the first stops. I'm so glad we got to do this in person. Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, folks, I love that conversation. Well, first of all, clearly Andy thinks I need to be getting up earlier, which I'll have to start working on. But I took a lot of notes about mindset, and I thought his story was so powerful, and his battle with cancer and how he's really living out what he believes. So first, I like the idea that he talked about mindset's really this ownership mindset. And it's everything happens for me rather than to me. It's kind of that orientation of it's really for me. It's to help me grow, develop. It's a gift rather than to me and I'm a victim. And then he gave us these 3 questions which were so profound that we should use whenever we're trying to readjust our mindset. What's great about it? What's great about this thing that's happened? Okay. What can I learn from this? And what does this make possible? I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it. What doors did this just open that maybe weren't there before? And so then specifically when we were talking about getting through tough times, as he talked about his battle with cancer, he gave us 3 other ways to approach situations like that. He said, this is how it is right now. So reminds us it's a temporal thing. It's not permanent. Gratitude. So how could we be grateful for this event? He said he was even grateful for the cancer that he'd been given, which sounds like such an odd thing to say, but he really had such a positive attitude towards that. And then what does this make possible? It goes back to that other question in our first set. What does this make possible? And he talked about now that he's gone through this experience, he's particularly qualified to help others who have gone through it too. So I loved that my conversation with Andy. I'm really going to take to heart a lot of what he said. It was very powerful for me to think about when you are dealt those hands that aren't what you expect, how can you change your mindset to take and make the most out of them?
Hey everyone, it's Ingrid Schmidt, producer for the Workplace Therapist Show. I want to take a minute to say thank you to everyone who's left a comment or review for the podcast. It means so much and gives us great feedback about how we can improve the show so that we can bring you great content to help you in your daily life at work and beyond. Today's review is from Coach Harrian. They say, "This is a great podcast. I have really enjoyed the guests and their contributions. The topics are timely and applicable. Brandon has a very easygoing style, a very approachable host who asks the right questions to get the right answers. Well done." Thanks for a great review, Coach Harrian, and thank you for listening.